Adopting a child from foster care can be wonderful. It helps thousands of children in foster care find permanent families. Often the children come from unstable homes or have families that aren't able to meet their needs. Adoption also allows adults to experience parenthood, sometimes due to infertility or medical complications, or in today's case, couples in same-sex relationships having biological children is not an option. So adoption is an alternative to starting a family together and sharing their life with a child. It can lead to rewarding and meaningful relationships between a parent and a child and provide loving and stable homes to children who need them. At least that's the hope. Of course, there are always the outlying horror stories you hear about children being placed with their forever families only to have them turn into forever nightmares as they endure physical and/or verbal abuse. It's chilling that in a home that's supposed to be filled with love and support, some children experience terrible tragedies from the people they're supposed to be able to trust. And today's episode focuses on a particularly gruesome case that involves the mistreatment of two boys by the hands of their very own adoptive parents. My name is Lucy, and on today's episode of Killer Bites, we're looking at a case involving two young boys, brothers, from the foster care system. They were supposed to be placed in their forever home, but it turned out to be a house of nothing but terror and abuse for them, all inflicted by their own adoptive parents, William and Zachary Zulock. I'd like to warn viewers that the story I'm about to talk about contains a lot of graphic content on very sensitive subject matters such as pedophilia, child sexual abuse, and child pornography. Here on Killer Bites, we want to handle the information we share with respect, but we strongly advise viewer discretion. I would also like to mention that this case is still ongoing. Court proceedings are still taking place and evidence is still being reviewed. And because of that, a lot of the information we have is currently only alleged. On the night of July 27, 2022, in Loganville, Georgia, police entered the home of William and Zachary Zulock. They were a married couple and adoptive parents of two brothers, ages 11 and 9. The authorities were there because they had evidence that suggested the parents were responsible for sexually abusing and assaulting their own sons. Not only that, but it was also believed that the two men were responsible for recording the abuse through photography and film and distributing it among other sexual predators in the surrounding area. It was around 11:30 p.m. when the police arrived at the Zulock residence. Zachary, who was 35 years old, answered the door and the police immediately took him into custody. They slammed him to the ground and handcuffed him. They found his partner, 33-year-old William, in bed. William was sleeping without clothes on, so at the time of the arrest, he was taken out of his home and escorted to a squad car completely nude. There he would wait until around 4 a.m. when the authorities raided his house. Then he and Zachary were transported to the county jail around 4 a.m. The two boys were also found and taken in for a sexual assault medical forensic examination, also known as a SANE exam. During each of their evaluations, the nurse performing the exam did find evidence that suggested the boys had been sexually violated. They even found injuries on the 11-year-old that were a result of being sexually assaulted. The police came prepared with a warrant which allowed them to seize any and all assets of the Zulocks to look for evidence. This included the house, any cars parked in the driveway, and any possessions on the property. As they searched the house, they found more horrific evidence linking William and Zachary as perpetrators to the two boys' abuse. They found dozens of files on a computer, both photos and videos documenting the tortures and abuse the boys had to endure. On top of that, they also got access to cell phone data and found on Zachary's phone a folder labeled Us. On it was even more photo and video evidence of sexually explicit materials involving the two boys. What's even more disturbing is that often William appeared in the recordings or pictures participating or forcing the boys to engage in these inappropriate acts. And it looked like Zachary was the one behind the camera. The parents, the ones these boys were supposed to call their family, were allegedly the very people exploiting them. In the end, the detectives were able to obtain 149 photos, 2 flash drives with William and Zachary's cell phone data, 2 handwritten letters from the oldest son, the SANE exam results for both boys, and they even found clothing in the boys' closets that matched the clothing the boys in the video were wearing. Some of the photos and videos dated all the way back to the year 2019, which meant these boys had supposedly been experiencing this abuse for years. The evidence was quickly stacking up against William and Zachary, and by the end of the raid, the two culprits had racked up a total of 17 charges against them. Authorities found that many of these materials had been shared via email or messaging systems with other male predators. They also found evidence that suggests William and Zachary pimped out their own kids to a network of other pedophiles. 2 of those predators were Hunter Clay Lawless and Luis Armando Vizcarro Sanchez. Both men were arrested for soliciting an act of sales with a human, and they also lived in the Loganville area. It remains unclear if either of them ever physically met the boys or had any sexual interactions with them. However, both men were facing other charges of child sex crimes as well. Plus, the police were actually able to identify the Zulaks as sexual predators because of Hunter. You see, earlier that very same day, the police received an alert from a software program designed to detect when large amounts of data containing child pornography or explicit materials containing minors is being accessed and or downloaded. The user was 27-year-old Hunter. Having taken him into custody and interrogated him, Hunter told the authorities about a man named Zachary. He met him through a mutual friend, and soon after they connected, Hunter started receiving several messages from Zachary containing explicit materials with a young boy. It's unclear whether Hunter was motivated to talk about his involvement by a plea deal. However, he talked about his interactions with Zachary, which he said were brief. Hunter claimed that it was Zachary who instigated conversations and that it was Zachary who boasted that the young boy in the videos and pictures he sent him were of his own son. Once, Hunter claimed that he received Snapchat messages from Zachary that said he was going to sexually abuse his son that night and that Hunter should stand by. Later, Zachary allegedly sent documentation of him doing exactly what he said he would. Hunter said he received numerous invitations from Zachary to join them and even messages that solicited the boys themselves, soliciting them like objects or property and not like a human being, let alone your own family member. But again, Hunter insisted that he never met the boys in person. Knowing that both the victims and the supposed perpetrators were living at the same residence, the police were able to find the Zulak's home address and obtain a warrant. The other predator, a 25-year-old man named Luis, had his own unrelated charges, which included a charge that suspected him of coercing a 13-year-old into sex, who was his own relative. Still, other unidentified men are being investigated, based on the computer and cell phone evidence the police were able to collect. Now, it may surprise you that when this story first came to light, it wasn't covered by many news outlets. This could be for many reasons. Some critics say it's related to bipartisan issues and media control, while others suggested it could be because of the graphic and violent nature of the crime. Especially when it comes to dealing with an assault on a minor, it's important to not only report the news, but to protect the victims and keep them safe. All public records have redacted the two boys' names to protect their identities. Regardless of why it was or was not covered by the news channels at the time, in August 2022, the news source Town Hall released a 4-part investigative article about the Zulak case. It revealed some horrifying things. So let's start with the perpetrators. William and Zachary met in 2013. They seemed like the perfect couple, both highly influential social media influencers and gay rights activists. They could often be seen in Instagram posts at rallies, parades, or other events supporting LGBTQ causes. They were even featured in Out magazine, a popular queer-centered publication, for a campaign they participated in advocating for same-sex marriage and LGBTQ rights. Zachary's Instagram profile, which is still available to view to the public but hasn't been active in several months, has a large array of uplifting and affirming photos and posts. He posted a picture of himself and William posing at the Atlanta Pride Parade. In another, the couple posed on their date night, Zachary wearing a rainbow-colored SunTrust t-shirt, a bank where he worked as a branch coordinator. They participated in AIDS Walk Atlanta for several years. People sometimes referred to them as the darlings of the local LGBTQ community. They often tagged their posts with #gay, #lovewins, or #loveIsLove. 4 years later, on December 14th, 2017, Zachary and William were married. Zachary posted several times that week showing off the ceremony, the wedding party, and the professional wedding photos he and William posed for. In a video post, they kicked off the ceremony with the wedding party walking down the aisle to Shania Twain's From This Moment On. It seemed like a beautiful and picture-perfect wedding for a happy couple. It wasn't long after the wedding that the couple looked to start a family together. The Zulaks looked into going through the adoption process with a Christian adoption agency known as All God's Children. It is now defunct, but it specialized in connecting parents with children with special needs. On March 26, 2018, the couple hosted an adoption shower. The banner photo for the event had a chalkboard in a garden with the message written, "We're growing by 4 feet." 2 pairs of adult shoes and 2 pairs of children's shoes adorned the sides of it. Zachary and William had been matched with 2 little boys. They were brothers, ages 7 and 9. They were originally placed in the foster care system when they were 3 and 5, taken from a home with parents that had issues with substance abuse. In the event description, they wrote, "The adoption process is moving along faster than expected." This puzzled many people. The process only took approximately 8 to 12 weeks before they were matched, whereas a typical adoption process can take anywhere from 6 months to over 6 years. Nonetheless, William and Zachary went through criminal background checks, attended mandatory pre-adoption parenting classes, completed a family assessment, and had a social worker conduct a home study, all within an expedited timeline. I guess maybe the agency looked at the couple and thought they could provide stable physical and financial care for the boys, but it still raises the question, why were they matched so quickly? On November 7th, 2018, they met their new kids, and Zachary took to Facebook posting the exciting news. On Wednesday, November 7th, 2018, at 8:30 a.m., the adoption is completely finalized and we will be a forever family. #ZulakHome. Again, the Zulak's digital footprint painted the picture of two loving parents who are excited to grow as a family. But if the allegations are true, their family turned out to be so far from that picture-perfect social media persona. On May 22nd, 2019, Zachary announced on Instagram that they'd purchased land to build their new home with their new family. A photo accompanied it of the couple posing against a wooden fence. Behind them, a large, beautiful but barren landscape. Again, time seemed to be on their side because within 6 months of starting construction, a giant mansion sitting on a 2-acre secluded cul-de-sac in a prestigious neighborhood of Walton County was built. This posed another red flag for people since other houses in the neighborhood were said to be sold at over $900,000. At the time, William worked as a government worker and Zachary worked at a bank as a branch coordinator. And $900,000 seems like that would be a little out of a government worker and a bank coordinator's price range. The family also took numerous trips together, visiting tourist attractions all across America. The couple posted photos of the boys at the Bean in Chicago, a selfie in front of the Human Rights Campaign headquarters in Washington, D.C., and a trip to a cabin in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. On the husband's social media pages, you can see they decorated their home with uplifting quotes about love and acceptance. Their couch was decorated with rainbow throw pillows, all saying, "Love above all." They had a light-up neon sign that read "Love is love," and their welcome mats adorning the doors were cute little quips like "Gayest place in town" and "It's basically a zoo in here." I'm not saying that a family with two parents working stable jobs can't go on vacation or have a nicely furnished home, but their online presence definitely had some people curious about how they could afford what seemed like a lavish lifestyle. As time passed, the Zulaks shared life updates. William posted on his Instagram account, which has since been removed, celebrating their 1-year anniversary as a family. In it, himself, Zachary, and the boys all posed wearing matching shirts that said Zulak 2019. In his caption, he wrote, "It's been just over a year as their parents. We have loved every moment of it. Was a little rough starting out, but we beat the 1-year mark. This was our 2nd year to the ocean. Last year was the first time they've seen it. I just love how this picture turned out. Our little #adoption family." It's especially disturbing to remember that the evidence the police found dated as early as 2019, which means it's very plausible that already, only a year into being placed in their new home, these boys were enduring the unspeakable. In 2019, Zachary posted photos of the boys, both holding school certificates. Their faces were censored by their parents, and at the time they were in 1st and 2nd grade. This is when the abuse was alleged to have started. And on November 7th, 2021, Zachary posted on Facebook celebrating the family's 3rd year of being together. I can't help but think that instead of that date marking what was supposed to be the happiest day of these kids' lives, it might actually mark the day they were betrayed. If these allegations are true, everything was so far from what it seemed. It surprised everyone that this was supposedly all just a front, hiding unimaginable horrors behind glitzy and happy posts. But how could this all have happened? How could two boys fall into the hands of such terrible parents, and how could their abuse go on for so long unnoticed? During investigations, a source shared that William and Zachary had allegedly told the boys, "Our business is our business, and what happens in our home stays in our home." These kids probably felt trapped and thought they couldn't turn to anyone. Authorities also found Instagram messages from Zachary reaching out to the woman that had originally helped them out with their first adoption. In the text chain, Zachary wrote that they were interested in trying to adopt another child. This time they were looking for a little girl, toddler-aged. Can you believe that? I mean, why did they feel the need to extend the abuse? This was back in October of 2021, almost a year from when these men would be caught. The woman informed him that the agency had closed, but that wouldn't stop the Zulaks. Zachary then asked if she could refer him to a different agency. I don't have any sources that suggest he ever contacted any of the sources she gave him, but I just can't understand how this couple could continue to abuse their children and decide they needed another child to inflict harm upon. According to the 17-count indictment against both William and Zachary Zulock, the charges included incest, aggravated sodomy, aggravated child molestation, felony sexual exploitation of children, and felony prostitution of a minor. During court proceedings, evidence continued to reveal itself. In an interview, William confessed in a sworn affidavit that he forced the 11-year-old boy to perform an oral act with the intent to satisfy his own sexual desire. Zachary admitted to sending child material to multiple people, but phrased it as less than a dozen, as if sending it to only one person would have been okay. It also came to light that Zachary had a previous sexual assault charge, also against a minor. Back in 2011, when Zachary would have been 24 years old, he allegedly lured a 14-year-old boy into a residence before assaulting him. This took place in Walton County, the same county as the child sexual abuse case took place. So how did this not come up in the criminal background check he had to undergo during the adoption process? Well, apparently this case just fell through the cracks of the justice system, which sounds absurd to me. How can someone who's even suspected as a child predator be overlooked when it comes to adopting a child? The case was 11 years cold at this point, and when prosecutors tried to trace it back to the original investigators assigned to it, they found that they were all retired. However, they were able to contact one of the current detectives of the Criminal Investigations Division, Lieutenant Zachary Barrett. He commented that the 2011 case was handled in a manner that is inconsistent with today's current investigatory standards. He agreed to reopen the case and look into any possible leads that could lead to more charges being made against Zachary. In addition to the sexual abuse, an anonymous source said that the boys were also subjected to physical abuse. That source spoke out against William and Zachary and said the kids were forced to stand in the corner sometimes for 8 hours or more as punishment. During that time, they weren't allowed to move unless it was time to eat or they had to use the bathroom. Another source said they witnessed William slap one of the boys across the face. Judge Jeffrey L. Foster is presiding over this horrific case, and at first, attorney John Haldy was hired to represent both William and Zachary. They filed for bond, however, Judge Foster denied their motion. He concluded that the two Zulak men were a threat to the community and children and could intimidate or influence witnesses or victims related to the case. He also wanted the couple to be tried separately. He ordered that William and Zachary be kept at separate facilities and be represented by different attorneys. He said the men would have to testify against each other, and he removed their right to claim immunity. This means the defendants couldn't use the excuse that since they were married, they shouldn't have to testify against each other. So Zachary was moved to the Barrow County Detention Center while William remains at Walton County Jail. Their shared attorney, Haldy, withdrew his support for Zachary and remained as William's legal representation. Zachary has been trying to find a private attorney, but because of his seized assets and lack of funds, he's finding it difficult. Although they're being kept in separate facilities, both Zachary and William have communicated with some mutual contacts. They were given allotted phone calls as well as tablet devices that had software called Jail ATM installed. This app allows friends and family to stay in contact with inmates. Users can email, video chat, and send monetary funds. They both used it to talk to a shared relative, and both complained about their treatment in jail. William, who's lactose intolerant, said he couldn't eat most of the food in the cafeteria, and the stuff he could eat he claimed wasn't high quality enough. "I don't even know a dog would eat these bologna sandwiches. That's how low grade the meat is," he said. He also called the housing conditions decrepit. When the relatives asked about some of the charges, William got teary-eyed and said, "All I can say is, I don't want to say it, but brace yourself for the truth." William also expressed concern for Zachary, saying that his partner was an emotional person and probably wasn't taking this all very well, and he was right. In the neighboring county, Zachary was also messaging about his time in jail. "I was just threatened again," Zachary wrote, "to physically beat me or have someone do it for him." He said he had been getting threats from his cellmates and even drugged at one point. He suspected that one of his fellow inmates slipped something in his drink because at one point someone offered him something and he didn't accept it. Then later the inmate asked him if he wanted another. Zachary said, "Another one? I've never had one before." He then claims that his arm went numb and he experienced what he thought to be stroke-like symptoms. He insisted that he be taken to a hospital and be evaluated for a stroke. Instead, he was taken to the medical wing of the facility and given a When he was asked about if he was worried about the kids, Zachary said he was, but quickly moved on to, I guess, what he thought was more pressing matters like his finances. He rambled on about payments on the house and the seizure of his assets and how it was going to affect him. He even started going down a mental list of subscriptions he needed to cancel so that he wouldn't get charged for it. I'll admit it's hard to sympathize with these men. To complicate things further, Judge Foster had to issue a gag order which restricts what information can be released to the public and what certain people involved in the case can say. Why? Because the shared contact William and Zachary had was leaking their text chains and phone conversations to the public, and it wasn't making them look good. The couple were shocked, but, I mean, come on, you're being held in a prison for committing crimes. Are you really surprised that your calls are being monitored? By this time, months of recorded jailhouse calls were already made available. In one message, Zachary pleaded that he be released on bond. He said, "Tell the DA that I want an ankle monitor and, if required, a low bond amount." Does he really think he has the power to negotiate that and that he can request a low bond amount? Zachary also admitted to some of the physical abuse charges he heard were against him. Using jail ATM, he wrote that he knew they weren't supposed to physically abuse the boys since they were told that it was illegal before when they were in the process to adopt. So I guess the Zulaks just thought making the boys stand in the corner for hours on end was an appropriate alternative since they weren't hitting them. I don't know what was going through their heads, and this isn't the only loophole Zachary tried to construct. While he was in pre-trial detainment, apparently he tried to get around the system's security and contact an old coworker of his undetected. He hand-wrote a letter, took a picture of it, then, using another inmate's tablet, sent it to the former colleague. However, it was still leaked. In the letter, Zachary revealed some of his legal strategies, if you can still even call them that. Without representation from an attorney, he was desperate to get out on bond. He wanted to claim that the night of the raid, the police used excessive and brutal force when they entered the home. He was asking for body camera footage, if it existed, to back up his argument. He also brought up the rule of sequestration and wanted to use it against the officer that interviewed him that night. Rule of sequestration is used to ensure that witnesses do not discuss the facts of the case or their testimony with other witnesses before appearing at trial. He claimed that the officer threatened him and wouldn't answer his questions. Zachary was also requesting that his coworker look at old cases regarding similar subject matter when it came to the seizure of their property and their assets. He seemed a lot more concerned with his stuff than he did for the actual crimes he was accused of committing. Zachary also asked about estoppel and nolo contendere plea. The former allows the court to prevent a person from making claims or from going back on their word. The latter roughly translates to no contest, and by taking this plea in court, Zachary would accept the conviction but would not admit guilt for his crimes. This guy was really set on trying to beat the court at their own game, when he really should have just been concerned with the actual charges he was accused of. It got to a point where Zachary even tried to reach out to the Walton County District Attorney himself and arrange a bond or plea deal without a lawyer. Many of the leaked messages from William's side seemed to express concern for Zachary. Multiple times, William asked their relative to relay messages to his partner that he missed him or that he loved him. But as Zachary tried to weave his complicated web of supposed loopholes, the court started getting irritated. In one message, William wrote, "Please tell him to slow down, and he can't rush any of this, and he needs to take some of my patience. And don't get fooled by what seems like a partner caring for the other just yet." Soon the couple even started turning on each other. At one point, William claimed Zachary was a pedophile and that he was engaging in these types of activities even before they had met. Meanwhile, Zachary claimed it was actually William who began targeting the children. Regardless of who started it, neither of these men stopped the other. Neither thought to protect the boys. Judge Foster called out the pair, saying he didn't think it was likely that Haldy was the one blabbing to the public about the details of the case. He said, "My instinct is that much of what is out there was conversation that was assumed to be in confidence that obviously was not held in confidence." But I don't think William took a hint, because immediately after the proceedings, he got on his tablet and messaged the very person who was leaking their conversations. "Someone is leaking our phone calls, texts, and emails. I've only talked about certain things with few people. I hope none of our family members are doing this to us." Zachary also wasn't picking up the clues because he wrote, "The DA mentioned a gag order at court on William. Don't know what that's about." Nobody, not just William, both of you. As of today, William and Zachary are each facing over 9 life sentences, and they've pleaded not guilty. Their court date was scheduled for March 2023. However, no sources are available regarding the outcome of either's trials. Hunter, one of the men who received solicitations from Zachary, was released on a $25,000 bond. Meanwhile, the other man police had in custody for performing acts of prostitution, Luis, remains in jail and is awaiting trial. The boys were relinquished from William and Zachary's care and returned to foster care. By now they're 12 and 10, and I can't fathom what it must have been like to return to the foster care system after everything they'd been through. As this case has grown in notoriety, people are outraged and horrified. Many directed a lot of their disgust towards the queer identities these men have. They ask how they were able to adopt, especially from a Christian-based adoption agency. However, at the end of the day, adoption decisions should be based on what is best for the child. Abusive parenting is wrong regardless of sexual orientation, gender identity, or religious beliefs. If we were holding interest in parents by some of the rigid standards and definitions people have against sexual orientation, then we wouldn't let a Catholic couple or a gay couple or even a couple who supported Boy Scouts adopt a child, because all of these factors have contributed to child molestation in some form. It's important to remember that this type of abuse is not exclusive to one particular community. Horrific examples of child abuse can be found across the social spectrum. It's something we all have to be fighting against, and any person considering adoption, regardless of their sexual orientation, gender identity, or religious beliefs, need to have a psychological background test. They need to be vetted before they're given the responsibility of caring for a child. As this episode comes to a close, I encourage everyone to be kind to one another and stay safe. Thank you for watching, and join me next time on Killer Bites for more bite-sized coverage on the most chilling true crime cases.
911, what is the address to your emergency?
By the 4th Street Laundromat.
What is it?
4th Street Laundromat.
What's the problem?
I've been abducted.
Who abducted you?
Shawn Grate.
You said John Green?
Shawn Grate.
Where's he at now?
Asleep.
Where's he sleeping at?
In the bedroom.
In what bedroom?
There's 2 houses right by the laundry street. And it's in one of those houses.
But you're at the laundromat?
No, I'm in the bedroom with them.
What color's the house? Is it a crop?
Maybe.
If I'm looking at the laundromat, which way is it?
If you're looking in the laundromat, it's the one on the left of the 2.
You don't know what color the house is?
No.
Does he have a car?
No. Well, he's right down the street.
So what's your phone number you're calling me from?
I don't know.
And you think it's a yellow house?
I think so, but it's on the left.
Is it an apartment?
No, it's a house.
Okay, does he own the house?
No, he broke into it.
Does anybody actually live there?
I think they've been abandoned.
And his name is Shawn Grate?
Yes.
Like Grate?
Yes.
Does he have a weapon?
He's got a taser.
What does he look like? Is he a white male or a black male?
White.
Is he like 6 foot or is he shorter than that?
He's like 6'1", 6'2".
Do you know how much he weighs?
Probably 175.
Are you injured?
A little.
What color's his hair?
Brown.
Do you know what color his eyes are? What's he wearing?
Nothing right now.
Okay, stay on the phone with me. Where did he take you from?
My apartment. I mean, I was walking with him.
You were walking with him?
Mm-hmm.
Where were you walking to?
I've known him for like a month and a half.
Is there any way you can get out of the building?
I don't know without waking him, and I'm scared.
Is there a bathroom in the house?
Well, his bedroom is closed, and he made it so it would make noise.
And if you told him you had to go to the bathroom, he would do something to you?
Yeah, because he had me tied up.
Are you tied up now?
Well, yeah, but I kind of freed myself.
Is he in the same room with you?
Yes.
Is it his phone you have?
Yes. Are they on the way?
Yeah, we have officers we're sending.
Please send enough.
Okay, if you're worried you don't have to talk, you can just set the phone down, okay? I just need to hear if the officers find you or not. Are you upstairs or are you downstairs?
We're downstairs. There's a door. There's a side door on the right of the left house, and that's where we enter. Immediately there's a kitchen right there, and then the bedroom is right off from the kitchen.
Are you bleeding from anywhere?
Not anymore.
Where were you bleeding from? You don't have to talk if you don't need to, okay?
I woke him up.
You just set the phone down. Are you still there?
I'm a stalker.
You what?
I'm a stalker.
Do you hear any officers outside?
No.
Okay, they're in the area.
See if they can come in the side door slow, like, softly.
Is there a padlock on the bedroom door, or is it just a regular lock?
No, I don't even know if it's locked. It doesn't have a knob, so.
Can you get up and see if you can get out?
I'm afraid of waking him. If I knew the cops were right there, I would do it. I don't even know if it opens, how it opens.
Is there a window around there you can look out?
Yeah, but the door squeaks and it's right by his head.
Are you laying down?
No, I'm standing right by the bedroom door.
And you can't open it?
What?
Can you open it?
I'm afraid without making noise.
Is the door to the house open?
I don't know, probably, maybe. I don't think he has a key, I'm not sure. Because I think he broke in here.
Can you see out any window that you're at?
They're all curtains shut.
He's on the first floor. Are you at the house closest to the laundromat or the other one? Are you the one closest to the laundromat or the other one?
We were standing in the laundromat looking at the two houses. It would be on the left.
Here, look out of the laundromat. So if you're looking at the laundromat, be the one on the right. At the laundromat. She said if you're looking at the laundromat, be the one on the left.
Side door. Side door.
And the side door. The side door to the right.
Okay, I can hear him.
You hear him?
Yes, I do.
Okay, do you think you can get out?
Yeah.
Are you out of the bedroom?
Yes. It doesn't have a doorknob. You need to push.
The door doesn't have a doorknob?
No.
Can you see them?
No, have them push the door a little.
He said push the door. Are they on the other side of the door?
Yeah, I think so.
She said have you guys push the door. There's no doorknob there.
Just push it slowly.
Can you hear anybody right now?
I heard the side door open.
She heard the side door open.
Where'd they go? I'm out of the bedroom.
You're out? Okay, can you get to the door where you can see out? Huh? Can you get out of the house?
Locked.
It's locked. Are you at the door?
Yeah, I am.
She's at the door. You're on the door to the right-hand side of the house.
Yeah.
She's at the door on the right side of the house. She got out of the bedroom. Is there a window there?
Yeah, I'm looking out and they tell me to come back.
She said,
Hurry, hurry.
she said to hurry up and come back.
Yeah, they can see me if they come
locked.
to it.
The door is locked. No, the bedroom door had no door handle. This one, it's locked. You can't get out. Can you unlock the door at all?
Come on out. Hurry up. Get out of here. Where is he?
Bedroom sleeping.
Still sleeping?
Yeah.
Okay, they have her.
He went unarmed.
He's unarmed?
Yeah.
All right. You need to go. Take that.
You just heard the real, heart-stopping 911 call placed to Ohio Police Dispatch in 2016 by a kidnapping victim whose captor is sleeping only feet away from her. This petrified woman has found a lifeline, but as we'll find out, Jane is in more danger than she or the police could have possibly understood so far. Let's dig into the harrowing 30-year crime spree of Shawn Grate. I'm Lindsay, and this is Killer Bites. The 911 operator asks Jane to get out of the bed and move towards the front door to anticipate the police's arrival. Just like her, they still don't know exactly where Jane is being held. The man who'd been holding her captive for days was lying right next to her, and Jane told the dispatcher he'd set up like a booby trap of noisy objects that would alert him if she tried to open the door. She said he's strong. He could catch up to her easily if he woke up. But the operator goads her to get as far as she can toward the exit she didn't even know was there or not. For all she knew, the door outside was blocked with more stuff or locked shut. And heart-wrenchingly, that's what Jane found when she finally made it to what appeared to be the front door. It was jammed shut, and Jane panicked through her state of shock. But emergency services were still on the line, and Through the excruciating silence, Jane thinks she finally hears officers walking the street outside. With the 911 operator's help, Jane directs police back toward the house that she was trapped in, and officers manage to force the door open to let Jane outside while the kidnapper still sleeps. Police found Jane bruised, bloodied, and in a state of shock when they rescued her from Shawn Grate, a 40-year-old drifter who was squatting in the abandoned house he'd taken Jane to. The evidence was clear when they caught him red-handed. Shawn Grate had kidnapped Jane and sexually assaulted her for the past 3 days. But as they questioned him in custody, Ashland police would uncover a trail of evidence that characterized Shawn Grate not just as a violent kidnapper, but a sadistic, sexually motivated serial killer who had been lingering right under their noses for years. In September of 2016, Shawn Grate was being interrogated for hours by police, who had found him naked in bed with a woman he'd been holding captive for the past 3 days. He was slow to open up to police, but as he did, both Shawn and investigators became confused about which crime they were discussing. Police were still processing warrants to search the rest of the property they'd found him on, but Shawn assumed they had already found the other girls in the house. Shawn backpedaled when he realized the truth. They really didn't know what bodies he was talking about, but it wasn't long before they found them. Once police were able to search the house, they found another woman bound and gagged in the upstairs bedroom. Her corpse had been decaying for weeks. And under one of the many piles of trash scattered throughout the house's bottom floor, the decaying body of a second woman was found. With news of murder victims coming through to headquarters, Shawn's interrogation with police continued. Investigators peeled over the outstanding missing persons cases from the county. Now that they knew just how badly the kidnapping they'd caught Shawn committing could have gone, police wanted to know how many more women he'd hurt. In the process, Shawn was almost excited to explain to them his reasons why, going as far as to demonstrate his methods to detectives on camera with that debauched enthusiasm that only the most disturbing serial killers seem to pull off. Shawn was born in 1976 in Marion, Ohio, to a mother who had recently divorced his father. She'd met him at the bar she worked in as an exotic dancer, and their whirlwind romance fell apart just as quickly. By the time he was 8, Shawn's mother gave up custody of her children to their father. Despite his family difficulties, Shawn grew to be a charming and well-liked teenager. Friends recall him having a way with words that could convince anyone of anything. And his charisma landed him a high school sweetheart with whom he'd have his first child at age 17. But their young love didn't last. Shawn and his teenage girlfriend fought often. She confided in others about his cruelty, which had become physically violent. He was controlling and abusive even in this early relationship. Still teenagers and now parents, it was too much for his partner, who finally decided to walk away. But when she did, Shawn would have his first arrest after strangling her in what might have been an attempted murder, considering how his ensuing relationships unfolded. But the court wasn't so strict, and Shawn was jailed for only a limited time before his release on parole. After the stint behind bars, Shawn dropped out of high school, and friends said his drifting had continued since then. Though they were fond of his company, Shawn couch surfed between his friends and family members. He bounced from one place to the next without an interest in finding a job. Instead, Shawn preferred to search for more platonic and romantic relationships to depend upon, and developed his rap sheet with petty thefts. In 1996, he was arrested with an accomplice and charged with residential burglary. He was sentenced to 4 years in prison, but served only 1 before being released on parole again. After a second incarceration, it appeared that Shawn never retained a sincere interest in reforming his behavior. All of Shawn's subsequent partners could attest that his overwhelming charm had a darkness underneath, like a true-to-life Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Shawn broke his parole when his relationship with the mother of his second child also devolved to physical abuse and violence. He struck and strangled her just like his other girlfriends, and for whatever reason, he was released from custody after yet 2 more arrests for incidents of violence against her. But as his second parental partner put up her boundaries, Shawn tracked down another woman to father a child with. Can you guess what happened next? Shawn's tempestuous, multifaceted abuse continued with the mother of his second son. This time, in 1999, a court ordered that Shawn be blocked from any contact with his newest child or its mother before she was born. True to character, when her protection order against him was put in place, Shawn confronted her and the child's grandmother outside her home with a knife in his hand. She knew what Shawn was capable of. A scuffle over the weapon ensued, leaving both of them with minor cuts and injuries to their hands before police arrived to detain Shawn. He was finally sent to prison for this last breach of his parole in 2003. When Shawn Grate was released from prison years later, he continued mooching off friends and family until he could use his disarming charisma to cajole vulnerable women into supporting him, one way or another. He consistently needed more control over the women he exploited and levied darker and more reprehensible mental and physical abuses against each of them as he went on. In one incident, he sent a woman he was dating to the hospital from his violence. Once she was there, he waited for nurses to leave the room before attacking her again in her hospital bed. By the time hospital staff rushed back into the room, Shawn had escaped. He went on the run and hid from police for 4 days before being discovered in probably the most terrifying way ever. Upon her return from the hospital, the partner Shawn had abused in the hospital felt uneasy in her home. She could tell that food had been moved and things weren't the way she'd left them. She called the police and told them she feared Grate was waiting for her inside of her couch. When they came to investigate, that's exactly where they found him, hidden inside the seat of her sofa, brandishing a knife. He was then formally arrested for the assault and others he committed against her that had gone unreported. It was another case of abuse repeated over and over again before authorities intervened at what seemed like the final hour. The thing about this case that I don't understand is how Shawn Grate can violate his parole, violate these women so many times, and still be released again to find yet another victim. By 2011, Shawn was married to a new woman and expecting a third child, his first daughter. But by 2012, he was again dealing with divorce proceedings for the same kinds of physical and psychological abuses that had harmed the people in his life so many times before. So, Shawn continued to serve couches and rack up more charges for petty crimes and driving under the influence. All the while, he kept finding psychologically vulnerable younger women to manipulate and control, luring them in with his gentle smile before revealing just how violent he was. He depended on them financially as well as emotionally. Shawn had a hard time finding employers who would look past his extensive, violent criminal record. He had limited options for employment, and he found a position at the Salvation Army store to support himself. Here, he met Jane at the end of the summer in 2016. Jane was working there as well, and they had bonded at work over what Jane described as a common appreciation for the Bible and games of badminton at the park after work. I think Jane, in her eyes, was trying to help a lost soul, and her relationship with Shawn was strictly platonic. But like he always did, Shawn wanted more. Jane had told Shawn that she didn't give anyone her phone number, that she wouldn't even allow a man into the house before an engagement, and repeatedly rejected his romantic advances. Though he was persistent, Shawn seemed to have handled this rejection surprisingly well so far. In the first week of September, Shawn offered Jane some lightly used women's clothes he'd found, and in exchange, Jane offered to read him some passages from the Bible as a payment for them. Shawn lived nearby, so after their shift together had ended, Jane walked with Shawn to his house to get the bag of clothes Shawn had promised to her. Bible in hand, she followed him into his home, an abandoned halfway house type of property that was previously owned by a local Christian ministry, which had used it as a kind of halfway house to rehabilitate criminals and addicts. It was a place for them to stay while they, recovered their finances and got back on their feet. It's unclear what the exact status of the house was while Shawn was living there. It appears to most that he was squatting there without anyone's knowledge, like it was basically abandoned. Regardless, Jane didn't know any of those details when she walked into the house with him, and the clothes were nowhere to be found. Rather, he sent her upstairs to his bedroom to wait while he got them out of the car. So, she sat on his bed and cracked the Bible open to find a good passage they could read. But when Shawn returned, he tore the Bible from her hands and told her they wouldn't be reading any at all. There were no donated clothes. When he came back, he had tape and rags in his hands to bind her with, and he told her she wouldn't be going anywhere anytime soon. Shawn violated Jane repeatedly for the rest of the weekend in every way possible. When they conducted their search, it was evident to detectives that he'd modified several household objects to abuse her with during her days of captivity. But during his interrogation, Shawn told police that he and Jane were in love, that they'd discussed marriage and still would be married one day. At some point while she was bound and gagged, he'd shaved a heart shape in her pubic hair. As he confessed, Shawn spoke to police in crazy, rambling tangents about Jane as if the horrible abuse he'd inflicted upon her was her own fault, a position many abusers take, essentially blaming the victim. His abuse was only an outburst of frustration he suffered at her obstinance. He claimed she'd been leading him on and holding him to double standards. This was a trend throughout Shawn's interviews and subsequent confessions. He always gave their mental health issues or some offenses he'd taken from the women as a caveat to the inexcusable crimes he committed against them. As investigators continued to peel back the layers hiding Shawn's atrocities, one after the other, he identified the corpse that was found still bound in his closet as 29-year-old Ashland resident Elizabeth Griffith. Elizabeth had gone missing weeks before and was last seen on security camera footage in the Walmart parking lot. It's hard to find further information about the circumstances of her disappearance. We're not sure if she was shopping or walking to another destination when she was caught on the camera. But Shawn told police that they'd been playing a game of Yahtzee at her place that day before they went over to his to make some barbecue chicken for dinner. And honestly, I have trouble believing any of the circumstantial details Shawn has offered to the police. It was reported that Elizabeth had struggled with her mental health, and police were searching for her quickly after friends and family lost contact with her. Elizabeth was a paranoid schizophrenic with bouts of mania and depression, and unfortunately, it's likely Elizabeth needed more support than might have been available to her. She ended up befriending Shawn only months before Jane's kidnapping. Shawn told investigators that Elizabeth frequently spoke to him about no longer wanting to live. He twisted Elizabeth's mental illness into a macabre justification for his crimes. He told police that he wanted to show her that she still wanted to live by forcing her to fight for her life. More than once during their friendship, Shawn had struck and strangled her for whatever reason he thought he'd come up with. And as Shawn described to investigators how he finally took her life, he recalled Elizabeth praying out loud, asking God for Shawn's forgiveness. "Forgive him," she screamed. "He don't know what he does," as he choked her to death. He told investigators it was an accident. He just wanted to show her how much she wanted to live, but had throttled her too hard. Shawn said that he hogtied her hands and feet together after she died, but police assume it's more likely that he'd bound and abused Elizabeth in the same way he had Jane. Investigators found Elizabeth's body decomposing beyond recognition in a closet he'd duct taped shut. They also discovered homemade devices just like the ones Shawn had used on Jane adjacent to Elizabeth's body. Police found the other remains in the basement of the abandoned house, fully clothed with a purse laying next to it. Inside the purse, they found the driver's license of another woman who went missing that summer, 43-year-old mother and grandmother Stacy Stanley. Stacy had just moved to the Ashland area after living with her sister in Idaho, so they still called each other all the time, and the last time they spoke was actually because Stacy had gotten a flat tire and called her sister for help. She didn't know how to change the tire, and her sister was arranging for her to get picked up by a family friend or her son when Stacy told her that a nice man had come by and offered to help. Shawn Grate told her the tire was a one-man job and proceeded to help her with it himself before Stacy's family lost contact with her completely. The only witness who could identify Shawn and Stacy at the gas station was the attendant behind the register, who'd seen them both when Stacy went in to buy Shawn a coffee as a thank you for helping her out on the road. The attendant later told police that Stacy seemed grateful for the help from a stranger and was in a bubbly mood when they exited the store together. Stacy gave Shawn a ride as a final token of appreciation, but after the conversation with her sister, her family never heard from her again. Her family was concerned for her safety right away, and the day after she didn't make it home, they were in contact with police and filed an official missing persons report. However, Stacy's family said that when they tried to raise concerns with the authorities, they were pretty much stonewalled. Stacy already had a history with the law, and her family says her difficulties with substance abuse and addiction prevented her case from being taken seriously. Even though Stacy had been clean for the 6 months before before her disappearance, was employed, and was finding a new direction for her life, her family struggled to get any attention from reporters or police on her behalf. Stacy's case was written off as a relapse, and her family was told it was most likely she was just off somewhere getting high. But Stacy's loved ones pointed to the discovery of her car abandoned with all of her belongings inside. Her phone, her bag, her wallet were all found inside the vehicle, which wouldn't make any sense for anyone to do. Stacy would still need those things even if she had relapsed. She wouldn't have just left them in the road and disappeared on her own. It was also notable that the driver's seat had been adjusted for a much larger individual, someone near Shawn's height of 6 feet, where Stacy was a petite woman, which made it seem like someone else had driven her car just before it was abandoned. Stacy's family continued their own search for the rest of the summer, but without police taking them seriously, their petitions for a search never went answered. Her relatives even took notice of the 2 abandoned houses in town by the 4th Street laundromat after hearing that people might be living in them, and asked police to investigate the properties more than once, but were told each time authorities didn't think she had truly disappeared. Shawn told detectives that after he had helped Stacy with her flat tire, she'd rejected his sexual advances until he tried to force her, and she sprayed him in the face with mace. And after she fought back against him, he became enraged and strangled her to death in the living room of the house before stowing her body in the basement. As his interrogation went on, Shawn Grate rambled maniacally on and on about the victims that the police didn't even know to ask about. Before long, he had told them the location of a 3rd body, a woman he was in a 7-month relationship with named Candace Cunningham. Candace was 29 in the summer of 2015 and was actually never reported missing because she'd last told her mother that she was planning on moving to North Carolina soon, and Candace had her own struggles with instability and substance abuse that left her in a marginalized place where her disappearance slipped through the cracks. But Candace was Shawn's girlfriend that summer for about 7 months before she was murdered, and you can actually see where she'd shared one of his posts on Facebook. The post was about marriage and commitment, and Candace changed her relationship status on Facebook to married shortly before her disappearance. Shawn didn't go into much detail regarding the circumstances of Candace's death, but he told investigators again that Candace had trouble with suicidal thoughts and had a desire to die that he had fulfilled. He made it out like a kind of vigilante mercy killing, and who can really believe any excuse he has to offer for the unjustifiable crimes he's committed against any of these women. Candace was remembered by those in her life as a feisty ray of sunshine that made everyone laugh and was always happy to help her neighbors when they needed a hand. Shawn led investigators to the location of her remains, which he had buried in a wooded area outside of town. But that's not the end of the interrogation. Shawn admitted responsibility for a 4th Ohio murder. The year before, in 2015, Shawn was playing pool at a local bar with a woman named Rebecca Lacey when he realized that his money clip was missing $4. He'd heard the click of its clasp while he was coming back from the bathroom, and that's the reason he gave police for taking Rebecca's life. Shawn hadn't even had proof that it was Rebecca who'd stolen $4 from his wallet, but he'd strangled her anyway for this before dumping her body on the side of the road where it went undiscovered until March, a whole month after she was reported missing. When police discovered the body near Route 30 in Ashland, a toxicology report ruled her death an overdose. Her case was reopened with Shawn's confession, and prosecutors suspected that Grate could have drugged Rebecca himself, since Jane had reported that Shawn forced her to take mysterious pills he identified as muscle relaxers during her torture. But Rebecca's autopsy hadn't isolated any signs of manual strangulation, which left investigators to depend upon a demonstration of Shawn's technique. He almost seemed proud to show detectives how he'd placed his forearm around a victim's neck and his hand over their mouth from behind to strangulate them without leaving the fractures and fingerprints that are commonly detected in other methods of asphyxiation. With the number of Shawn's victims rising to an unanticipated extent, the picture of a compulsive serial killer was rapidly unfolding before detectives. They kept prodding him further. Were there any more women whose lives Shawn had taken? They'd push him to reveal yet another murder from as early as 2005. Shawn said he couldn't even remember the name of the first woman he killed, but that it started with a D, maybe Dana or Diana. This was confirmed when Shawn was able to point out the exact location of Jane Doe's undisclosed body recovered by police years earlier. It was a dog walker who discovered human bones scattered across a field next to Victory Road in Marion County. Without any clothing, jewelry, wallet, or identification of any kind, the sheriff's office didn't have any way of knowing who the young woman might have been. An autopsy established that her death was a homicide by strangulation. The Ohio Bureau of Investigation was working for years to identify her and continue an investigation into her death that would bring her the justice that she deserved. Though she remained unidentified for 13 years, this first murder victim was identified as Dana Nicole Lowry of Minden, Louisiana, a 23-year-old mother of two who was traveling through Ohio selling magazine subscriptions. Dana had sold Shawn's mother, whom he was living with at the time, several subscriptions that never materialized. Shawn whined to police about his mother's constant spiteful words over the missing magazines. He told police that she'd cursed her and that was the reason why he'd tracked Dana down in Ashland months later. He approached Dana under the pretense of purchasing more subscriptions, but then he used a knife to force Dana into his car. He abducted her as well for who knows how long before stabbing her and strangling her to death. Shawn made it out to police that he'd murdered a young woman for the first time as revenge when his mother's magazines never arrived. Right. But detectives already knew that Shawn immediately resorted to horrific violence as soon as his sexual advances were rejected. And even if they weren't, they suspected that this attack too was essentially sexually motivated. Just because Dana's body wasn't identified for nearly 13 years after she went missing, it didn't mean that her family in Louisiana wasn't desperate to find out what exactly had happened to her. Dana had two young daughters at home, and while she was traveling for work, she always called them where they stayed with their grandparents every night before bedtime. They knew the first night that she missed that call to her girls that something was wrong, but with her disappearance occurring so far away, her family was at a loss with where to even begin. Dana had disappeared into thin air until police detained Shawn so many years later. At this point, police wanted Shawn Grate behind bars again as soon as possible for as long as possible. With Shawn's confessions and the implicating evidence laid out clearly, prosecutors steadily built their case against him. While in jail awaiting trial, Shawn began writing to local and national news services. In the letters, Shawn spun a creepy narrative about the crimes he'd committed. He railed against the perceived impact of state welfare services upon society in true nutjob fashion, even though he himself had been on welfare throughout his life of unemployment and exploitation. Whether he was looking for attention or he was just twisted enough to truly believe what he'd written, or probably both, he described the women he'd brutalized and murdered as the zombie victims of the system. He claimed his victims were barely alive enough to take care of themselves. Shawn wrote that he wasn't guilty of committing a crime at all. The women were already dead without lives of their own to claim. While most newspapers, luckily, declined from publishing any of his crazy ramblings, and both the prosecution and defense teams in the case obtained a gag order to stop Shawn from communicating with the media anymore. Shawn's defense lawyer pushed for a verdict of not guilty by reason of insanity, but Shawn's psychiatric evaluation deemed him of sound enough mind at the time of the murders to understand what he was doing was wrong and hide the evidence he committed the crimes. Police continued to speak with Shawn until the trial to gather any more information they could about the murders he'd confessed to and any he might not have. Detectives established a rapport with their suspect that became integral in the securing of Shawn's confessions, and once he was imprisoned, they found out that Shawn had been receiving an unprecedented amount of jail mail. Letters from fans, or whatever you'd call someone who idolized someone as terrible as this, trickled in every week. When officers asked Shawn what people wrote to him about, he told them about a writer who'd asked him who his favorite serial killers were and if he had any inspirations. Detectives asked him to answer the question for them too. What serial killer did he feel he resembled most? Shawn thought about it with a chilling matter-of-factness. He told them that he identified with Ted Bundy because, in his words, Bundy was just completely heartbroken. At trial, prosecutors argued that Jane, the woman police had found being held against her will in the abandoned Ashland house Shawn was squatting in, was his only victim who hadn't fought back against him, and that was the only reason she'd survived long enough to escape. The women he'd killed had done nothing to provoke the claiming of their lives, but Shawn became enraged each time his sexual advances were rejected. They pointed to his confession, in which he blamed each victim for their own deaths for one irrational reason or another. Shawn was indicted on 23 counts, from first-degree murder to burglary and tampering with evidence. Prosecutors said that considering the depraved actions and gruesome evidence evidence collected in the cases, the state was seeking the death penalty. Shawn showed no remorse in the courtroom and ended up pleading guilty to 15 counts. And on May 7th of 2018, jurors found him guilty of murdering Stacey Stanley and Elizabeth Griffith. He was sentenced to death on June 1st with an execution date of September 13th that year. But, as they often do, Shawn's legal team submitted an appeal to the Ohio Supreme Court that stayed the execution until Shawn's appeal could be evaluated. In the meantime, Shawn pled guilty to the murders of Rebecca Lacey, Candace Cunningham, and Dana Lowry in 2019, and was sentenced to life in prison without parole for all 3 murders. In 2020, Shawn Grate's appeal to the Ohio Supreme Court was dismissed. He's currently scheduled to be executed on March 19th, 2025. But there was another snag. The state of Ohio stopped using lethal injections for their executions in 2020, but the state has yet to legalize any other method of execution. Inmates on Ohio's death row are still in a state of limbo until legislators can compromise on a new method of execution to commit their sentences. At least Shawn has finally faced justice for all of the pain and abuse he inflicted on the people around him for his entire life. Even though the authorities' intervention came too late to save the lives of 3 innocent women who deserved so much more, there's little chance that Shawn will ever be released from prison and will die in jail if his execution takes longer than 2025. This case really exemplifies the immense difficulties that the women of marginalized communities face when seeking action from authorities. I think all of us can do better to look past our prejudices to help others in need. And the spirits of these women live on to remind us never to take the disappearances of anyone, no matter who they are, for granted. Thank you so much for watching Killer Bites. I'm Lindsay, and we'll see you next time.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Killer Bites. It's common knowledge that most murder victims knew their murderer in some way or another. Maybe it was a jealous ex, a bitter spouse, or a sketchy neighbor. But what about the cases where a victim doesn't know their attacker at all? What if a victim is chosen for no real reason? What happens when a killing is truly random? My name is Brandy, and today I'm going to tell you about the thrill killing of Kimberly Cates. Now, what is a thrill killing? A thrill killing is a random murder committed solely for the excitement of the act. The killers in these cases kill just to kill, with no higher reason or purpose. The murder of Kimberly Cates is notable not only for its sheer brutality, but also for the randomness with which she was chosen. This gives it all the hallmarks of a thrill killing. Mount Vernon, New Hampshire, is a small town of about 2,500 people. It should not be confused with Mount Vernon, Virginia, the historic plantation home of George Washington. There are 18 towns in the U.S. named after Mount Vernon, but only one Mount Vernon. The residents of Mount Vernon are very particular about the spelling of their town's name. Theories abound as to why Mount Vernon is Mont and not Mount. Some suggest an old town clerk made a filing mistake one day and lost the U. Others say the French spelling of Mount is used due to the area's large French-Canadian population. Whatever the origins of its unique name, Mount Vernon is an idyllic New England town about an hour's drive from Boston. It's the type of place that still has a general store, one that has been open for over 120 years in the same location. Residents celebrate their town's agricultural past with Lamson Farm Day on the last Saturday of every September. It would have been about a week later then, on October 4th, 2009, that the murder of Kimberly Cates would occur. Kimberly Cates was a 42-year-old nurse who worked at several hospitals in the region. She was known to love running, gardening, and attending karate class with her 11-year-old daughter, Jamie. Kimberly's husband, David Cates, was a contract engineer for the government. This meant he often traveled for work and was away from home for weeks at a time. The Cates had moved to Mount Vernon in 2004, partially for the well-known safety of the area. They lived on Trow Road, a dirt road in an outlying forested part of the town. This same isolation that provided peace and quiet would also make their home a prime target for our murderers. Yes, that is murderers, plural. On the night of Saturday, October 3rd, 2009, 11-year-old Jamie had fallen asleep in her mother's bedroom. David was away on business, as was common. Jamie awoke shortly before 4 a.m. in a totally dark house to her mother, Kimberly, asking, "Did you hear that?" Kimberly got up and slowly walked to the open bedroom door, where a man emerged from the darkness and attacked her with a machete. A second man appeared and grabbed Jamie, who attempted to defend herself, but she was no match for a full-grown man. Jamie was struck 18 times. Her jaw was shattered, part of her left foot was severed, and her skull was split open. The man then violently threw her against a glass door, breaking it in the process. Jamie fell down amidst the broken glass and blood, lying still and playing dead. It was this difficult decision, likely made in just a split second, that would thankfully save her life. Her mother, Kimberly, would not be so lucky. She suffered 36 blows from her attacker's machete. Several organs were pierced, her skull was split open, left eye socket destroyed, and several bones shattered. All the while, she pleaded with her attackers to stop. When this didn't work, she attempted to reassure her daughter and herself that everything would be okay. It was not these injuries that would kill her, though, but the blood loss. Satisfied that Kimberly was dead, yet not bothering to check that Jamie was, the killers grabbed some jewelry and fled the house. 11-year-old Jamie, critically wounded, then managed to crawl to the kitchen and call the police. "They killed my mommy," is all she was able to whisper. When the police arrived, they cleared the house and found that the murderers were long gone. There were signs of a break-in and that the home's power had been turned off, then on again. Jamie, on her way to the hospital, identified her attackers as 2 white men, one bald and the other in a hoodie. As the spouse is often the first suspect in a murder, David was initially suspected. However, when contacted, his innocence was quickly ascertained as he was in Maryland on business. He rushed home as quickly as he could to be by his daughter's side at the hospital. So who were the murderers of Kimberly Kates? Stephen Spader, age 17, would later describe himself as the most sick and twisted person you'll ever meet. He was a former Boy Scout and had just got his GED after dropping out of high school. Spader was fascinated with the ideas of violence and mayhem. He even openly admired both the Manson family and the Zodiac Killer. Spader, a high school outcast, formed a club for other misfits that felt like him. However, he envisioned this club not as a social group, but more like a criminal brotherhood or a gang. They called themselves the Disciples of Destruction. The disciples included Christopher Gribble, age 19, Spader's right-hand man, as well as Quinn Glover, 17, and William Marks, 18. After first designing a logo for his club, Spader decided that the next order of business would be initiation. But what would be a fitting initiation for a disciple of destruction? The only way, in Spader's mind, to bind his club together would be with blood. The blood of someone innocent. The blood of someone random. A random killing, he reasoned, would not be traced back to them. Plus, he more than anything just wanted to experience the act of killing another person. It didn't matter who that person was. Only that all 4 of the Disciples of Destruction engaged in the murder. Spader and his lackeys then spent a few days scouting homes in the Mount Vernon area, since they knew it to be remote. They settled on a home off Trow Road due to the further isolation of the houses and heavy forest cover. This chosen home, however, actually belonged to the Kates' neighbors. On the night of the home invasion, Spader would call a last-minute switch and target the Kates' residence when he noticed a security system installed on the neighbor's house. "We're about to do the most evil thing this town has ever seen," Spader told his disciples. According to Gribble's later testimony, the gang first lowered Marks in through a basement window, but he couldn't access the main floor, so they hauled him back out. All 4 then broke in by removing the AC unit in a porch window and crawling inside. Once inside, Gribble turned off the circuit breaker to plunge the house into darkness. On their way to the master bedroom, they looked for smaller items to steal and pawn. They found Jamie's iPod, which they used as their sole light source in the pitch black home. When they entered the master bedroom, a woman's voice called out, "Jamie, is that you?" Testimonies from both Marks and Gribble state that Spader attacked instantly, slashing at Kimberly with the machete he brought along. Spader then attacked Jamie with a knife, throwing her into the glass door when she tried to defend herself. He believed her to be dead, so he didn't check on her. As this went on, Glover retreated to the living room, perhaps squeamish. Marks did not participate in the attack either, though he stood guard by the door and watched it happen. Spader had initially talked about making a scene for the press by eating people, putting heads on spikes, and roasting bodies, but none of this was done. As Spader and his gang left the Cates' home, they restored power to it to make it appear as though all was normal. On their way out, they stole one of David Cates' old wallets, a pearl necklace, and 2 wooden jewelry boxes. The next day, they would pawn these ill-gotten goods for about $130. So what went wrong for the Disciples of Destruction? They'd gone out of their way to target a random home, left no witnesses that they knew of, and tried to make it look like a burglary gone wrong. How were they caught? Well, the murder was a thrill killing, remember? And the killers bragged. By 5:30 a.m., less than 90 minutes after they'd murdered Kimberly Cates, Spader and crew met up with another friend, Autumn Savoy. Spader had previously tried to recruit Autumn into the Disciples of Destruction, but he had been resistant to the idea of killing another person. Despite these reservations, Savoy had no problem at all with helping Spader dispose of the evidence. Spader, Gribble, and Savoy dumped the bloody clothes, shoes, and some of the stolen goods into the nearby Nashua River. The rest of the goods were pawned later that day. After bragging to Savoy and doing a poor job of getting rid of the evidence that wasn't sold, Spader and the group decided to split up and head back to their homes to sleep. But they wouldn't sleep or even remain apart for long. At 5:30 on October 4th, still the same day as the murder, Spader and Gribble would meet at another friend, Kyle Fenton's house. There, they bragged about breaking into a home, stealing some things, and killing 2 people. Spader and Gribble even showed Fenton the knives they'd used and mentioned a machete had also been involved. Accustomed to Spader's posturing and talk, Fenton believed his friends were lying. He thought they were just making up an elaborate story about murdering 2 people to act cool. After Spader and Gribble had left, Fenton saw a news report about the Mont Vernon home invasion and was faced with the sickening truth. His friends weren't lying. The next morning, October 5th, Fenton's mother, Carol, contacted the local police on behalf of her son. The police spoke with Kyle Fenton and noted that a lot of what Spader and Gribble had told him matched up with the specifics of the crime scene. Fenton also gave them the names of Marks and Glover. When he identified Spader and Gribble, though, the police were shocked. The police knew who they were. After examining the crime scene, the police were on the lookout for any suspicious vehicles. Spader and Gribble had been pulled over earlier that day for speeding away from a police cruiser. They had been questioned and then let go. At school, a resource officer would notice an abnormally nervous and anxious teen and approach him. The student, who goes unnamed, would tell the officer that the day before, Sunday, the day of the murder, he took a lot of drugs while hanging out with Spader, Gribble, Marks, and Glover. All 4 were boasting about the attack. The student, like Kyle Fenton, didn't believe they were serious. However, Gribble went into graphic detail about stabbing both Kimberly and Jamie. He stated that it was awesome. Spader would say that he was looking forward to do it again. All of them then went to the mall together to pawn the stolen items. The items the student witnessed being pawned matched those taken from the Cates' home. The 4 boys then showed the student the machete Spader had used to attack Kimberly Cates. The machete was still in the trunk of Gribble's car. Spader told the student it had been covered in blood, but they'd cleaned it up using ammonia and bleach. This unnamed student then got a frantic call from his girlfriend. After all the talking and boasting the murderers had been doing, word was getting around. She asked if Marks specifically had been involved in the killing. He told her yes, he had been, and that all 4 of them were currently bragging about it. This student's girlfriend then likely talked to Glover's girlfriend, who called Spader to yell at him for getting Glover involved in a murder. Spader got angry and blamed the student for ratting him out. He and Gribble both pulled out knives and prepared to attack. The student managed to get away though. Glover blocked Spader and Gribble from attacking him. Then Marks drove him home. The next day, the student was paranoid that Spader and Gribble would get him at school. It was this behavior that led the school resource officer to approach him and get him to talk. After their talks with Fenton and this unnamed student, the police set out looking for Spader and Gribble. They were found, along with Savoy, in Spader's family home. 4 knives were confiscated from Gribble, and the boys were taken into the police station. Glover and Marks were still at school and would later be brought in separately. Glover at first told police he'd been asleep at home the night of the murder. He'd later concede that he had actually been driving around Mount Vernon with Spader, Gribble, and Marks, but would say no more without an attorney. Marks, however, told the police everything. He told them about Spader, saying, "We're about to do the most evil thing this town has ever seen." He told them that since he was the smallest of the boys, he'd been lowered into the basement to find a way in, but he'd been unable to access the main floor. According to Marks, one of the others let him in through the basement door after they broke in by taking the AC unit out of the porch window. This conflicts slightly with Gribble's later testimony that he hauled Marks out of the basement before they all entered through the porch window. Marks told the police about someone cutting power to the house, stealing items, and using Jamie's iPod as a light source. He then said that when they entered the master bedroom, Spader had attacked Kimberly with a machete, while Gribble attacked Jamie with a knife, then threw her into the glass door. Marks then admitted that he had been the one to help Spader scout houses in Mount Vernon for a potential target. He also mentioned that Spader had changed the plan at the last second, targeting the Kates home instead of their original target. Overall, Marks gave up everything to the police. It was still the day after the murder. Next, the police would question Autumn Savoy. Savoy first said that Spader and Gribble couldn't have committed a murder that night, as they showed up at his house at 2 a.m., smoked some pot, then gone to sleep. However, this flimsy lie didn't hold up under police pressure, and Savoy cracked almost immediately. He then said that Spader and Gribble had left his home late Saturday night, intent on killing someone. Savoy thought they were joking. He'd later text Spader if he was doing a job, here meaning burglary. At 1:30 a.m., Spader texted back, "Busy, we'll hit you when I can." At 5:30, Spader and Gribble showed back up at Savoy's house. They woke him up, told him they'd just killed 2 people, and showed him the bloody machete and knife. Savoy also noted that Spader and Gribble were wearing different clothes. They'd changed after the attack and wanted to burn their bloody clothes at his house. He talked them into throwing the bloody clothes into the nearby Nashua River instead. After throwing the bag of clothes, knives, and some of the stolen items into the river, the boys decided that the next step would be breakfast. They stopped at a convenience store for a snack. The time was 7 a.m. After being questioned, Savoy led the police to the spot along the river where they dumped the bags. Inside, they found the stolen items, David Kate's wallet, and bloody clothes that literally had the names of Spader and Gribble on the tags. Gribble was interviewed next. Unknown to Gribble, the police already had what they needed to put him away, but they wanted a confession. He first made up a story about going to the mall with his friends to buy cheap jewelry, then pawn it for profit. The police weren't buying it and informed him they were in the process of getting a warrant for his DNA. This gave Gribble pause. He asked the officer if the crimes they were investigating were eligible for the death penalty. The officer stated that he didn't think so. This was apparently good enough for Gribble, and he started talking. First, Gribble said that the crimes were a conspiracy and that he and Spader were both psychopaths. A week prior to the murder, they had robbed a home near Spader's house. After running out of the money they made pawning the stolen goods, they decided to do it again. Spader and Marks then started driving around Mount Vernon looking for a home to target. They knew that Mount Vernon would make for an ideal location due to its remoteness. Next, Spader and Gribble decided that if they even burgled a home and found people inside, they'd have to kill them for fun. They made Marks and Glover agree to this as well. Gribble went on to essentially verify the story Marks had already told the police, but he added some new details. Around midnight on Sunday, October 4th, he and Spader meet up with Marks and Glover outside a Walmart. Spader had told them all not to drink or do any drugs, as they all needed to be sharp and present for what they were about to do. They changed their clothes, put on gloves, and piled into Gribble's car. Gribble dropped the other three off near the home they were originally targeting, then parked his car out of sight on a hill near a tractor. All four boys left their phones in the car. They didn't want them to go off while they were in the house. This is why they eventually needed to use Jamie's iPod as a light source. When Gribble caught up to the others, Spader had already made the call to target the Kates home instead, as it didn't appear to have a security system. According to Gribble, he lowered Marks in through the basement window, then pulled him out when Marks couldn't open the door. This is the only piece of his confession that does not match that of Marks. They then broke in by removing the AC unit on the porch window. Spader, machete in hand, was first in. All four were armed with sharp weapons, yet only Spader and Gribble would actually use them. Gribble himself turned off the circuit breaker. They went room to room, stealing things as they went. When they entered the master bedroom, Spader attacked Kimberly with the machete, while Gribble stabbed Jamie in the face and chest before throwing her against the glass door, assuming she was dead. After making sure Kimberly was dead, they looked around for more items to steal before turning the circuit breaker back on and making their escape. Once back at Gribble's car, they changed clothes and threw all their bloody clothes into a black trash bag. They drove back to the Walmart, smoking cigars in the car to celebrate. Marks then left in his car alone, while Spader, Gribble, and Glover went over to Savoy's house to brag. Savoy helped them dispose of the bag of evidence in the river and was instructed to act as their alibi. He did attempt to follow through on this, but we've already seen how that went. The boys believed that they'd killed 2 people, but when they checked the news, they saw that Jamie had survived. Spader got combative and accused Gribble of failing to kill her, but Gribble said he'd wanted to kill someone for a long time. If he'd have known she was playing dead, he'd have made sure she actually was. Finally, the police spoke with the leader of the Disciples of Darkness, Spader. They already had what they needed, but wanted to see if he'd add anything to the story. Spader lied and put the blame entirely on Gribble. He said he had no clue who committed the murder, but that they deserved the death penalty. He then mentioned that he was with Gribble when he pawned the stolen jewelry, but he didn't know where it all came from. That was all the police got out of him before he refused to speak further without a lawyer. On Tuesday, October 6th, slightly more than 48 hours after the murder of Kimberly Cates, Spader, Gribble, Glover, and Marks were arraigned. Spader and Gribble were charged with first-degree murder, attempted murder, and conspiracy to commit murder, as well as a few other lesser charges. Marks and Glover were charged with burglary, conspiracy to commit burglary, and robbery. A month later, Savoy was charged with 2 counts of hindering apprehension or prosecution and 1 count of conspiracy to commit hindering apprehension or prosecution. Glover, Marks, and Savoy would all agree to testify against Spader and Gribble if the prosecutors did not pursue higher charges for them. Even incarcerated, Spader could not stop bragging. He wrote a letter to the public calling the people of the town uninformed idiots and attacking David Cates for protesting the inclusion of Glover and Marks in the school yearbook. In Spader's own words, "It is not their fault that they were arrested and charged with what they were charged with, and yet through all the struggle, they both are still trying to get an education." Spader also wrote letters to Chad Landry, a fellow inmate of the maximum security section of the Hillsborough County Jail. In the letters, Spader described the preparation for the attack itself, and the hours after in vivid detail. Spader's trial wouldn't begin until August 2010. Despite all his bragging and talking, he pleaded not guilty. Spader's defense attorney argued that Spader had only claimed credit for the crimes as a way of getting attention, but that he hadn't actually committed them. A forensic scientist also testified that nothing tied Spader physically to the scene. But these were two weak arguments and were overshadowed by a slew of evidence and the testimonies of Spader's friends. Marks, Glover, and Savoy all testified against him, giving details about his brutal attack of Kimberly and his plan to use murder as an initiation into the Disciples of Darkness. Kyle Fenton also testified and told the court about Spader and Gribble visiting him at home. Spader himself openly threatened witnesses that were put on the stand, which did nothing to help his case. His attorney tried to claim that the others were setting him up as a scapegoat for the crime. Chad Landry, the fellow inmate Spader had been writing to, also took the stand against him. Landry presented all the letters that Spader had sent to him. He'd saved them all for potential leverage while pretending to flush them down the toilet. A handwriting expert would attest that the letters were written in Spader's handwriting. The jury deliberated for only 90 minutes before convicting Spader on all charges. On the day of his 19th birthday, Spader was found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder, attempted murder, conspiracy to burglary, and witness tampering. He was sentenced to life without parole, as well as another 76 years for the attempted murder of Jamie Cates. According to the Telegraph, a Nashua newspaper, Judge Gillian Abramson made each of the sentences consecutive to one another to ensure that Spader stay in that cage for the rest of his pointless life. Gribble would be the next to go to trial, where he would plead not guilty by reason of insanity. Under New Hampshire law, this meant that Gribble was essentially confessing to the charges against him, but it was up to his lawyers to prove that he had committed them while not in the right mind. They'd argue that he suffered from antisocial personality disorder. A friend of his would say that while Gribble was intelligent and spoke well, he had a warped worldview where he saw himself as a destroying angel, something no sane person would ever say. Gribble himself would say that he'd been dreaming of murdering his mother for years due to her abuse. These abuse allegations would never be corroborated. According to WMUR New Hampshire, in his statement to police, Gribble said he had wanted to kill someone for a long time and was disappointed he didn't feel any emotion following the Kates killing. He told police that he and the others planned on burglarizing the home and killing anyone who might be there, just for fun. During the trial, he'd go on to say he just felt nothing. It was kind of cool because it was different. It was a curiosity, like, oh, that's what bones look like. On the moment when he cut Kimberly Kates' throat, he said he moved very carefully from the carotid artery and had to adjust at one point because he got the angle wrong. This spoke to a precision and thought that went into the murder and did not help his plea of insanity. The prosecution would then argue that Gribble knew the difference between right and wrong. He'd been of sound enough mind to plan, commit, and cover up a murder. His own testimony even showed his precision and cold-heartedness. The jury would convene for 2 hours and then reject Gribble's insanity plea. They declared him guilty of first-degree murder, attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, conspiracy to commit burglary, and witness tampering. Gribble was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, plus 50 years to life, as well as an additional 52 years for other charges. Marks pled guilty to conspiracy to commit murder and burglary, as well as being an accomplice to first-degree assault. In exchange, he got a reduced sentence of only 30 to 60 years in prison. Glover pled guilty to robbery, burglary, and conspiracy to commit burglary for a reduced sentence of 20 to 40 years. Savoy pled guilty to conspiracy and hindering apprehension and prosecution for a reduced sentence of 5 to 12 years. He was paroled in 2015. In 2012, the Supreme Court ruled that any minor sentenced to life in prison would be allowed a resentencing hearing. Spader declined his, but a hearing was held anyway. His life plus 76-year sentence was upheld. Gribble would seek a reduced sentence though. His sentence would also be upheld. In the aftermath of the trials, Mount Vernon would try to return to normal. The murder of Kimberly Cates was an awful affair that rocked a small, otherwise peaceful town. David and Jamie Cates would stay out of the public eye and continue to heal. Lamson Farm Day would continue on, and the general store would remain open. Yet many residents would purchase guard dogs or guns to protect themselves. There's no such thing as an innocent stranger anymore, one resident would tell the New Hampshire Union leader. What do you think of the senseless tragedy at Mount Vernon? Did Marks and Glover get cold feet by not actually participating in the murder? Did they perhaps feel any of the remorse that wasn't felt by Spader and Gribble? Please let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching Killer Bites. I'll see you next time.
In May of 2023, a taxi driver dropped a passenger off in an unusually isolated location in the dead of night. He had no idea that the woman he was transporting had an unhealthy obsession with true crime, and that she had just spent the last few hours acting out her darkest fantasy. That was until he helped her with her suitcase and felt the dripping from within it. On May 27, 2023, a taxi driver in the city of Busan, South Korea, called police after noticing something deeply disturbing about one of his recent passengers. The driver had picked up a 23-year-old woman in the city and had been asked to drive to the outskirts, specifically to the Nakdong River. The young passenger brought a large suitcase with her for the journey, which she stored in the trunk of the taxi. Once the driver and his suspicious passenger arrived at their rural destination, the driver helped the woman retrieve her bag, only he immediately noticed something was wrong. The bag had leaked a substance onto its outer layer and onto the taxi's carpet. The driver, not wanting to cause a scene, allowed the passenger to leave with her bag. He then inspected the wet, sticky puddle in his cab to discover that his worst fears were correct. The substance was... The taxi driver called the police, and the woman, a young true crime mega-fan, was promptly arrested. Jung Yu Jung had developed a fascination with all things macabre in nature, and had committed what she reportedly believed to be her perfect crime. Months prior to her arrest, the 23-year-old loner had become obsessed with murders, consuming any and all media she could get her hands on that related to the killing of a human being. From books to TV shows, Yu Jung immersed herself in true crime, and when the time came that she felt she simply needed to experience murder in real life, it did not take Yu Jung long to come up with a plan on how to do it. Jung downloaded an app developed to help parents find tutors for their children. She posed as a mother in search of a tutor for her non-existent child. Jung found her target, a university student offering English lessons, and then told the tutor that her daughter was in 9th grade. They arranged to meet at the tutor's home. Jung Yu Jung then dressed herself up in a school uniform that she bought online. Armed with the knowledge provided by hundreds of hours of studying murder, Jung set out to commit one of her own. With Jung being just 4 foot 9 inches tall, her disguise as a middle schooler worked. Once Jung Yu Jung entered the tutor's home, she stabbed her victim over 100 times. Jung then exited the tutor's home, traveled to her own home, and retrieved her suitcase. She then went to a store to purchase trash bags, zip ties, and bleach. Jung was captured on CCTV wheeling her suitcase to the store. Her demeanor in the footage suggests she is carefree and happy at the time. From the footage alone, one would never suspect that Jung Yu Jung had just taken a life. With a cleanup kit likely inspired by a true crime documentary, Jung cut her victim up and placed the body parts inside the trash bags. She then placed those bags inside her suitcase. Jung kept her victim's ID card, wallet, and phone. This was her attempt at making it appear as though the young tutor had disappeared, as opposed to having been brutally murdered inside her own home. Jung may have felt she had everything covered at this point, but she failed to clean the tutor's home sufficiently, leaving her own DNA evidence behind. At around 3 a.m., after carrying out her stomach-turning crime, Jung Yu Jung called for a taxi. She asked for a ride to the Nakdong River. Once there, Jung disposed of her victim's remains. Luckily, her taxi driver called the police almost immediately, and Jung was arrested. When questioned by police, Jung initially claimed to have killed the tutor by accident during an argument. South Korean police easily saw through the holes in Jung's story, however, and she soon confessed to her sickening crime. Jung's reported motivation was that she wanted to see what killing another human being was really like. Investigators searched through Jung's phone and found chilling evidence that Jung Yu Jung had been planning to take the life of a stranger for months. Jung's phone records have revealed that she searched for tips online on how to hide a dead body. Her search history also included terms like the perfect murder. She also rented multiple true crime books from the local library. It is worth noting that police found almost no contacts stored in Jung's phone and no history of messages exchanged with friends or family. The reports of her being a loner were seemingly true. It is also true that this young woman was capable of horrendous bloodshed, but what could have possibly led Jung Yu Jung to stab and then dismember another human being? Surely there had to be a better explanation rather than that Jung simply watched too many true crime shows. Perhaps her isolation had played a part. Jung had been raised by her grandfather after her father remarried when she was young. She reportedly did not like being around her grandfather, and when it came to friends, Yu Jung reportedly had none, even during her days in school. Her classmates described her as strange, citing her choice to distance herself from her fellow classmates. This was seemingly all down to Jung, as she was reportedly not bullied at school at all. After completing her high school education, Jung became a recluse. She continued as a loner with no social life. She did not even have a job. This gives weight to the theory that Jung may have selected her victim with purpose and out of jealousy. The young female tutor allegedly had an active social life, was successful in her studies and in her employment, and spoke near perfect English, a language Jung had repeatedly struggled with since her early days in school. Whether Jung Yu Jung chose her victim for this reason remains unknown. She may well have simply selected the tutor at random, as throughout this saga, killing was Jung's focus. Everything else was akin to background noise. Thanks to a broken relationship with her family and a lack of friends, Jung was completely isolated and possessed underdeveloped social skills. Reports suggest that her decision to kill was, in Jung's mind, a way to make her father suffer for abandoning her as a child. A member of the prosecution has stated that Jung's life experiences have played a major part in her decision to kill. Jung Yu Jung seemingly sought an outlet for the deep-seated anger accumulated throughout her troubled upbringing, strained family relationships, educational and employment failures. It is believed that her psychopathic tendencies influenced the commission of the crime. Prior to her arrest, Jung Yu Jung had no criminal record and no history of mental illness. While Jung remained disturbingly calm both after stabbing her victim to death and after being arrested, police have shared that Jung has expressed remorse for her actions. They have also revealed that she is undergoing psychological evaluations. Jung also said she feels sorry for what she did. We are conducting tests to see if she is a psychopath. On June 9th, Jung Yu Jung appeared before reporters and offered up an apology. "I apologize to the victim and her family. I must have been out of my mind." The 23-year-old, socially awkward and unemployed, Jung set out with one goal: to commit her perfect crime. Jung was so obsessed with the idea, though, she failed to pay attention to the details. Had Jung properly secured her victim's body parts before calling a taxi, and had she extensively cleaned the crime scene, she may well have gotten away with murder. In the end, the horrible reality is that Jung's story now matches those which she was once so fascinated with. Having an interest in true crime is in no way a warning sign that someone is likely to commit crimes themselves. When Jung Yu Jung took out a knife and used it against her victim, she was clearly disturbed and deranged, regardless of her hobbies and her everyday life. Now, she will likely spend the rest of that life behind bars.
In the digital age, it seems that we're constantly under the microscope of social media. We're all posting constant updates on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. And for influencers, there isn't a part of their reality that they won't share. If you're not familiar with what live streaming is, it's slightly different than just streaming a video over the internet. With your normal streaming services, you're able to download a file and then watch. With live streaming, it's supposed to be happening in real time, but not always. Usually these technologies only have a few second delays, allowing people to interact in real time. But with the advancement of technology, there's always the question of morality. Has technology advanced beyond our own morality? These particular discussions are now being had around the advancement of AI technologies. And they are particularly important in this case, because it seems our advancement in technology almost helped a killer get away with a devastating crime. That's right. In this haunting case, a possible killer attempts to use a live stream to try and cover up his sinister acts. Stephen McCullough was a 32-year-old Irishman who lived in Woodland Gardens, Lisburn, Ireland. He appeared to be like any other gamer in the gaming community. He loved to play Robot Combat on his YouTube channel under the name VoteSaxon07, and he loved to live stream his games for his audience, but soon his image would be shattered forever. Natalie McNally was a wonderful 32-year-old woman, and according to her family and close friends, she always highlighted equality and fairness, and always acted to further causes she regarded as important. Professionally, she was an advocate for LGBTQ+ issues and backed women's rights. She had a wonderful personality and was described as being very lovely and upbeat. Natalie and Stephen began a relationship in August 2022. At first, things seemed like any other new couple. Then Natalie got pregnant and seemingly things changed. On December 18th, 2022, the night started off like any other night. Natalie had been watching football at her parents' home. Stephen had texted her around 5:57. "Right, I'm away to stream the night away. Wish me luck." What Stephen meant was that he was about to start an online live stream. And that night, Stephen was engaged with a live stream of the computer game Grand Theft Auto beginning around 6 p.m., meaning he was going to be at his computer with an audience watching him play a game. So he would have lots of witnesses watching him play the game, and it would virtually be impossible for Stephen to be anywhere else except playing the computer game, like he said. Meanwhile, back at her parents' house, Natalie decided to finally drive home around 7 p.m., which is confirmed by a nearby CCTV that showed Natalie arriving at her home around 7 p.m. So by the looks of it, there was nothing out of the ordinary, but that would all change. Sometime later, Natalie's neighbors heard a horrifying sound. They claimed that they heard a scream. So what happened to Natalie? Natalie was supposed to have been home alone, since Stephen was engaged with a live stream on his computer. And if Stephen was busy, who could have made Natalie scream? Meanwhile, back at Stephen's house, he was having a little glitch during his live stream and had to repeatedly tell his viewers that he could not respond to comments or interact with them due to technical issues. That's strange, and would become a big point of interest for investigators later. One of the main reasons to host a live stream is for the live interactions with the audience, so the audience can experience the game with you in real time. Unlike a pre-recorded game, where there can be no live interaction. Despite the technical problems, Stephen was enjoying himself on his live stream for almost 6 hours. But back at Natalie's house, things had taken a deadly turn. As reports would later state that night, Natalie was stabbed to death in her home. The attacker killed both her and her unborn baby, Dean. The following day, Stephen went to Natalie's home, and what he would find would shock him. Stephen was shocked to discover Natalie's body. Stephen immediately called the emergency services. It was quickly established that Natalie had suffered compression to the neck, stab wounds to the neck, and head injuries from a blunt instrument. During an investigator's report, they said that Natalie had died a violent death, having been stabbed a number of times, and there were signs of defensive injuries. While investigators were combing the scene of the crime, they found a knife. But investigators did not find the blunt instrument that had also been used. A truly horrific crime committed on an expectant mother. Detectives also seized Natalie's car for further investigation. The vehicle was taken from an address in the Lisburn and Castlereagh area. Additionally, officers carried out house-to-house inquiries in the Lisburn area on Saturday. Police would go on to look at CCTV footage, eyewitness accounts, and some other strange technologies to hunt down a suspect. With few suspects, investigators' attention turned to Stephen. He was arrested on December 19, 2022. But Stephen was subsequently released due to his tight alibi. As you remember, Stephen had been on a 6-hour live stream the night of Natalie's murder, and therefore could not be a suspect. Therefore, Stephen was discounted as a suspect on December 24, 2022. But then who else could have a motive to want to harm poor Natalie? Who else could have wanted to hurt her? The whole case didn't make sense, and eventually the investigation turned back towards Stephen when a shocking discovery was made. What the police discovered is that the live stream Stephen claimed to be on might have been pre-recorded, which would explain why he couldn't interact with any of his audience during the supposed live stream, but it does leave a lot of unanswered questions. If Stephen's live stream was pre-recorded, then why lie to Natalie about it being re-recorded? What could he have been trying to hide from her? And furthermore, if Stephen wasn't on a live stream during the time of Natalie's death, then where was he? Well, new evidence was about to come out that would change the course of this case forever. District Judge Rosie Waters said she was told that Stephen denies involvement in Natalie McNally's murder, but he has conceded in a police interview that the purported live stream was pre-recorded by him days earlier. Judge Rosie Waters relayed that at the conclusion of the interview process last night or early this morning, after consultation with his legal representative, Stephen has given us a written statement, essentially, and in that written statement, he has acceded that the live stream was not live and was in fact recorded by him on the 13th into the 14th of December, and that he had streamed it on the night of Sunday the 18th. A huge break in the case, and a huge setback for Stephen's airtight alibi. But yes, Stephen eventually admitted that he was in fact not live streaming on the night of Natalie's death. But he claimed that while he was not live streaming, he was at home having a drink. Stephen said that he had a drink at home and then fell asleep at his house. But investigators were not convinced. It doesn't make sense that Stephen would first lie about the live stream being live, and that the live stream that happened to be pre-recorded would coincide with the death of his partner, Natalie. It all felt a little too convenient for Stephen. So investigators dug a little deeper into Stephen's whereabouts during the night of Natalie's murder. And using a combination of CCTV evidence, investigators were able to track Stephen on the night of his supposed live stream all the way from his house to Natalie's house in Lisburn, Ireland. On top of the CCTV evidence, investigators also found evidence from the bus that Stephen boarded to get to Natalie's home, as well as an account from a taxi driver who drove Stephen back to his home after the time of Natalie's death. Some pretty incriminating footage. So while Stephen was hoping to fake his live stream from his computer to cover up a possible murder, another set of cameras were live streaming his whereabouts without him ever knowing. Further evidence on the CCTV footage from the bus Stephen rode to get to Natalie's house showed Stephen wearing a yellow glove underneath a black glove while giving change to the bus driver. That's bizarre. Why wear two sets of gloves? Unless you were wearing cleaning gloves under your regular gloves because you plan to commit a crime. And it seems that might have been the case, because at Natalie's crime scene, there was trace evidence of cleaning gloves on a stain of blood at Natalie McNally's murder scene. With so much evidence stacking up against him, Stephen was arrested a second time and was scheduled for a further proceeding in court on February 24, 2023. During Stephen's hearing, detectives revealed that they found out that Stephen works in the local media industry, and therefore has extensive knowledge about gadgets and tools in the media space. And it turns out Stephen was not only using live stream technology, but also cell phone technology to get away with murder. It turns out that Stephen had purposefully left his cell phone at Natalie's parents' house in an attempt to record their conversations. It's suspected that Stephen was trying to gauge if Natalie's parents suspected him of murder. But with the fake live stream, the CCTV footage, the evidence at the crime scene, and an attempt to spy on Natalie's family, things are not looking good for Stephen. Steven's lawyers defended Steven by arguing that the details of the live stream were not a strong basis for suspecting him of Natalie's murder. Steven was in the hearing but did not speak, which was noted by several outlets. A detective on the case weighed in and said that the yellow glove would be consistent with the trace of marigold cleaning glove on a stain of Natalie's blood at the crime scene. When making a bail application, the defense lawyer challenged the basis on which the police had connected the defendant to the charge and said essentially what the evidence seems to all hang on is that the man did not live stream when he said he live streamed. Steven's defense went on to say that his client acknowledged in his statement that the footage was pre-recorded, but that he had been drinking and watched it go out live online. But the prosecution told the court that at 7:09 p.m., when the live stream was supposed to be in progress, a man that matched Steven's description was filmed on CCTV 2 miles from Steven's Lisburn address, walking towards a bus stop in Dunmurry. This man that matched Steven's description was wearing a hood, snood or scarf, and gloves, and carrying a shopping bag. This same man is the man that traveled to Lurgan by bus, which is where Natalie's house was located. The prosecution went on to argue that the man's height and build are consistent with those of Steven. It was also stated that in one section of CCTV gathered on the bus, a portion of the man's eyes and nose area are visible, which they argued also matched Steven's features. The defense then brought up that it was alleged that the same man on the bus got off in Lurgan, with CCTV showing him walking towards Silverwood Green. The prosecution was quick to add that the man initially walks past Silverwood Green. In other words, he walked past Natalie's house. The prosecution argued this would allow him to walk past Natalie's house and to see if the car was there and the lights on. Then the prosecution said that the same man came back a few moments later at 8:52 p.m. and then entered Natalie's house. And then around 9 p.m. is when Natalie's neighbors reported hearing a woman scream. If Steven is confirmed to be this man, it would be pretty hard to not believe he didn't have something to do with Natalie's murder. The prosecution went on to say that this same man was then seen leaving the area at 9:31 p.m., having changed his clothes. That seems suspicious as well. If it wasn't Steven, where would this suspect get a change of clothes? Then the man is seen walking to Carnegie Street in Lurgan, where he then gets into a taxi. And the prosecution told the court that the taxi driver later positively identified Steven in a Viper video identification parade electronic recording. Wow, that seems like pretty strong evidence against Steven. Although Steven's defense lawyer stressed to the court that the identification of Steven by the taxi driver came after Steven's image had appeared in the media relating to the case. The court then heard the man in the taxi then traveled to Steven's Lisburn home. Again, it seems hard to believe that a random man would travel from Steven's house to Natalie's house and back again. To add to the account, the prosecution said that when the man got out of the taxi, he went into the grounds of the house before coming back out to pay the driver and collect his bags from the vehicle. Then the taxi driver explained to the court that the man threw his bags over the hedge. And to further draw the connection between Steven and this man, the court heard that 3 minutes later at 11:16 p.m., Steven's mobile phone was activated for the first time since 5:57 p.m. that night. Wow. After hearing all that, it's hard not to suspect that Steven was not in some way connected to what happened to Natalie. The court then heard that at 12:17 a.m. the following morning, more CCTV footage showed Steven standing at the front of the house that the taxi dropped the man off at, putting bins out. Steven was not wearing the same clothes as the man who arrived at the house, but it is also not outside the realm of possibility that he just changed his clothes. And that's what the prosecution alleged, that Steven purchased, changed, and disposed of the clothes that he had worn the night before. In addition to all the other overwhelming evidence, there was an account that Steven had seen text messages between Natalie and an old partner days before the murder took place. This could give Steven a clear motive if it is proven to be true. To summarize, if the prosecution is right and they find Steven guilty, that would mean that he would have faked a live stream, then taken a bus to Natalie's house, murdered her, then taken a taxi back to his house after the murder while being caught on camera by eyewitnesses and cell phone data technology. Natalie's parents and brothers were in court as this evidence was outlined, which must have been so hard to sit and overhear the multiple accounts that might have linked Stephen to Natalie's murder. Meanwhile, Stephen watched proceedings via video link from a police custody suite. He did not speak at any stage in the proceedings. This court appearance came after more than 1,000 people gathered at a rally in her memory at Lurgan Park on Saturday in honor of Natalie. The rally was organized by the National Women's Council, and there were also a number of politicians that were in attendance, including Sinn Féin Stormont leader Michelle O'Neill. Many of those in attendance carried placards reading "Justice for Natalie," and "She was only at home," while a number wore pink or blue items of clothing in memory of the mother-to-be. Brendan, Natalie's brother, spoke at the rally and said that his sister was an inspiration to other women. In court, the judge refused to offer bail to Stephen, but said he could apply for bail at the High Court. In common law countries, mainly those in the former British Empire, the High Court is often the superior trial court and has plenary original jurisdiction, with lower courts, such as district courts or magistrates' courts, having limited jurisdiction. Often the High Court tries the most serious offenses such as murder, rape, and terrorism. So likely, Stephen's case was first heard by a district court and is now being turned over to the High Court. Additionally, a High Court may serve as an intermediate appellate body before appeal to a Supreme or Constitutional Court. Some jurisdictions, especially federations, may have multiple high courts, each with jurisdiction over a particular region. This is still an ongoing case, and Stephen's official trial is not likely to take place for a number of months, a court has heard. But Stephen still remains in custody after being charged with Natalie's murder. Stephen has continued to deny murdering his then partner, who was 15 weeks pregnant with his child. The case was briefly mentioned at Craigavon Magistrates Court on March 24, 2023. The prosecutor asked for a further 4 weeks, saying the prosecution file will not be due for some time. Pressed by District Judge Bernie Kelly to provide a date for when the file will be ready, the prosecutor said it will probably be some months away. The judge said she intends to keep an eye on progress with the file. The case is next due to be mentioned on April 21st, when the prosecution is expected to give a date for when the file will be ready. In the meantime, several news outlets have covered the story because of the unique and shocking nature of the crime, and the bizarre use of technology to try and hide a murder. Some reports about the case are claiming that Stephen even left hidden messages about Natalie's death staged in the gaming live stream. If that's true, then those pieces of evidence will most definitely be used against Stephen when his trial date is finally set. This case is another reminder that domestic violence can happen to anyone, regardless of their social status or economic background. Domestic violence is an issue that does not discriminate. It affects all people, regardless of race, gender identity, sexual orientation, and socioeconomic status. It affects children, our friends, and even our pets. To understand relationship abuse, we must recognize that it's more than physical violence. Ending the harm and stigma of domestic violence requires a nuanced understanding of the behaviors that define it, as well as examples of healthy relationships to inform your decisions and interactions moving forward. Domestic violence, also referred to as intimate partner violence, dating abuse, or relationship abuse, is a pattern of behaviors used by one partner to maintain power and control over another partner in an intimate relationship. Domestic violence doesn't discriminate. People of any race, age, gender, sexuality, religion, education level, or economic status can be a victim or perpetrator of domestic violence. That includes behaviors that physically harm, intimidate, manipulate, or control a partner, or otherwise force them to behave in ways they don't want to, including through physical violence, threats, emotional abuse, or financial control. There are multiple types of abuse that are usually present at the same time in abusive situations, and it's essential to understand how these behaviors interact so you know what to look for. When we know what a relationship looks like and means, we can then take steps to get help for ourselves, as well as better support others who are experiencing abuse. There are advocates that are available 24/7 by phone or live chat to help discuss your situation and help you determine if your relationship might be abusive. If you are in an abusive relationship, there is help available. To contact the National Domestic Abuse Hotline, call 1-800-799-7233. Thank you so much for watching Killer Bites. I'm Brandy, and we'll see you next time.